and welcome to Two CPAs and the Mic, the podcast where we talk tax, finance, and all things related to business. Whether you're a business owner, working professional, or someone who wants to start a career in accounting, this is the podcast for you. Hosted by CCK Strategies partners Jeff Frable and Sara Mays, we dive into relevant business and tax matters with working professionals to make these topics less intimidating, relatable, and dare we say fun? Let's get down to business.
Welcome to another edition of Two CPAs and the Mic. We are so glad you are joining us today. We have a great show for you today. We are going to be talking with Athletic Director of Oral Roberts University, Tim Johnson. We're going to be talking about NIL. If you don't know what NIL is, you definitely want to stay on because it is going to be an extremely interesting topic today. But we are here to discuss relevant business, accounting, and tax topics and do it in a way that is not doing or using the same jargon as our profession. And we don't want to be stuffy. We want to be fun. We want to be somewhat entertaining and give you some really good information with our episode today. I am Jeff Frable. I've been a partner at CCK for 20 of the 25 years I have been here. I am excited to be the co-host today. And my other co-host is with us again. Hey, Sara.
Hey, Jeff. I'm Sara Mays, and I am also a partner at CCK. And I've been a partner of the 18 years that I've been here. I'm going to try and follow Jeff's phrasing of the 18 years I've been a partner for
4 months.
Yes.
But it's been the best 4 months, Sara.
It has been the best and the fastest 4 months. It's been insane. And then we also have Christy with us.
Morning, guys. Hello.
Good
morning. Good morning. Good morning. Glad to be here.
So did you all, now we know we have listeners from all over the country and all over the world, right?
Yeah.
If you didn't know, this week has been a very rainy week in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Did you guys ride your boat into work this morning?
No, thank goodness it dried up a little bit yesterday. It was good to see the sunshine, but then the rain had to come back.
Yeah, I think I saw it's been the wettest April in Tulsa history. So crazy fun fact there. But we're not here to talk about the weather today. We are here to talk about NIL, and I've been looking forward to this episode. Ever since we started planning episodes, I said, I need Tim Johnson on this podcast because of his wealth of knowledge and information about this topic. Tim Johnson, good morning. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing great, guys. I am not a partner of CCK, so I bring a little bit of a different viewpoint here. So
That's right.
I'm looking forward to it. And I have had to deal with a lot of weather with changing games, and baseball is played outside. So that creates problems here in April, and we got a lot of makeup games to get in.
Absolutely. Well, Tim, one of the things we like to do in the introductory part of our episodes is kind of introduce our guests. I've explained to you the whole premise of our podcast is Two CPAs and the Mic. So obviously Sara and I are the CPAs, but we want to have someone special on the mic every time. And usually there's a story behind that guest, and I call it God connecting the dots. And that's no different in our relationship. We met back in about 2015 when you joined Oral Roberts University. And I'll let you give a little bit of your bio and background. Not only are you the athletic director at ORU, but you're a husband to an amazing wife and a father to 3 beautiful kids. And more than anything else, I've never known anybody who can ask for money with more dignity and care and grace than this guy. So, Tim, tell us a little bit about your journey to ORU and what you do since you've been named athletic director.
Well, I'm actually from Oklahoma, just north of Tulsa here, Bartlesville. So that's where my family still is, and we get to see them. So being at ORU has been a big blessing as far as getting to see my family again, because I've been a bunch of different places. And so, but coming out when I was relatively young, I was played a bunch of different things. And so I went to Oklahoma State to try to play baseball, but then ended up transferring to Arkansas to be on the football staff with Coach Houston Nutt, which really got me into athletics. And I always wanted to be an athletic director. Didn't even know why, but I'm giving you kind of the nutshell version of this. So I had a guy who my dad kind of ran into that they worked together when they were about 16 in Tulsa at a Safeway. And so you talk about God connecting the dots. This is a guy who said, well, if Tim wants to be an AD, man, he's got to get back into football, right? And so he wanted me to get back into football. He knew Coach Nutt. set up an interview for me to go over there. First thing Coach Nutt asked is, you going to walk on and play wide receiver? And I said, no, I'm not. That is not why I'm here. So even though I was a football guy, but was able to get back into it there as far as coaching, and really loved my time there. That same guy that my dad ran into is the same guy who introduced me to Terry Don Phillips, who would become my biggest mentor and second father in my life. And so that summer that I transferred, I just drove out to meet Terry Don. Didn't really have a plan or anything. Probably had a week's or two worth of clothes. Ended up staying a month out there in his garage apartment. And we just really hit it off. And so for the next prolonged period of time, I would be at Arkansas and do the football thing. Then we'd have fall or spring ball, obviously in the spring. And then he'd give everybody the spring break off. So I'd go down. I was a Major League Baseball agent for a while, so I still did some of that during spring break down in Florida. And then in the summers, I'd go work for Terry Don at Clemson. And so when I was getting ready to graduate Arkansas, I remember being out there with Terry Don, and I remember, whatever Terry Don, that's my mentor, right? Whatever he said, I did. And so I was like, Terry Don, I'm getting ready to graduate, man. Like, what am I going to do? And he said, well, I've already thought about it, and you got two options here. And I said, okay, so what are they? And he said, well, the first one is you can come out here now, start working. And Terry Don had every degree you could have. He had a law degree, PhD, master. I mean, there was a degree, he had it. And so he said, well, you can come out here and start working now and get you a part-time MBA, or you can stay there at Arkansas, get a law degree, and be the head GA on offense. And I was like, law, I'd never even thought about getting a law degree. And I was like, what are you talking about? And I said, well, what do you think I ought to do? And he said, well, I already talked to Coach Nutt. You're going to get that law degree. And I said, oh, great. That's great. So I remember driving back home. I was stopping in Mississippi or something at a hotel, and I'd look up what the LSAT was and how what the test was to even get into law school. I didn't even know at the time. So ended up doing that, had a great time. Again, getting a law degree. I still don't sleep very much because of the lack of sleep during that period of time. And then as soon as I graduated there, Terry Don Phillips brought me out to Clemson, had a good 7-8 years out there. He gave me a bunch of stuff to do that I probably had no business doing, and let me supervise football when we built Clemson football under Dabo Sweeney, and baseball and soccer, who's gone on to win, I think, between all of them, the programs that I was blessed to supervise and help hire those coaches have won 4 national championships, 2 in men's soccer and 2 in football, obviously. So really great experience there. And then, Jeff, you kind of know this story, just out of the blue. Mike Carter's nephew knew my brother, and so Mike was going to be stepping down, and got a call from him about coming out here and working and maybe potentially doing kind of a transition type deal. So that's how, a little bit of a nutshell of how I got from Bartlesville to Oklahoma State to Arkansas to Clemson, South Carolina, back to Tulsa. And then I got to meet Jeff Frable. That's the best part of the whole story.
The best part.
And so you kind of came in as a deputy AD initially to ORU, and the Mike Carter that you're referring to was the athletic director before you. And just say that doesn't give him enough credit. He was here for 25 years at Oral Roberts University, maybe even longer, because he started as being legal counsel for ORU, but he's kind of a mainstay at ORU, and you took over for him. And in fact, you helped build a building that's got his name on it now. So, and how long have you been athletic director at ORU, Tim?
Well, if you count the transition, we're probably about 6 years, 7 years, something like that, as far as transitioning into this role. And this is my 10th year at ORU. So it's hard to believe how fast time flies, but it is. It's 10 years.
And you are officially the guy in charge for how long? Couple years?
So this is my 4th year going into my 5th year, if you
right?
Don't count the transition.
Wow. Okay. Man, time flies when you're having fun and you're running a successful athletic department, right?
It's unbelievable, man. There's all these gray hairs.
Yeah. So the main thing that I picked up from your intro there is that you were the reason Clemson is so successful in their sports and their athletic department. Is that's what I heard, right?
I
don't know if I'd say that. I was blessed to be somewhere. Every once in a while, I believe this. There are times in your life where you're really blessed to be around the right people at the right time, and God blesses what you guys are doing. And I was definitely there for that period of time when we did some really special things. And obviously, Jeff, that is who I am, right? So what we did there, the culture we built there, the different processes and how we evaluate things. It's all the same stuff I do here, right? And so I was blessed to be able to learn that there and then take it and apply it here. And we've had, at ORU, some amazing success as well. It's been quite a ride so far in only 10 years.
Well,
Wow.
as we kind of transition into the topic that we wanted to talk about, for those of our listeners who don't know anything about Oral Roberts University, give just a brief background on the athletic department, kind of the size, what conference we're in, how that compares to things like the Big Ten or the ACC, the SEC. How does all that kind of fit into the landscape of college athletics?
So one of the things that drew me to Oral Roberts University was when it first started, it had a lot of success, right? I mean, it was a situation where this is a program that had been to the Elite Eight in basketball, had been to the College World Series in baseball, had been to the Elite Eight in volleyball, had been one stroke away from winning a national title in golf. And I'm forgetting a lot of different other successes that they've had, but this is all within a period of, when the school had opened up, probably within 10, 15 years. So a lot of success. And then went through a period of time where, like a lot of universities, had some struggles and didn't necessarily win as much as they thought they could. And so one of the things that I was excited about when we hired different coaches is I said, man, we're just trying to resurrect something that's really been special here in the past. And so, but obviously to do that, we had to increase budget. We had to get the right people on board. I think there had been kind of some success where maybe there had been a little bit of complacency that had worked its way in. And so we just had to get rid of that, change a little bit of the culture. And then, Jeff, as you know, the last several years, we've been able to go back to the Sweet 16 in men's basketball. A couple years later, we had the best season ever in men's basketball with 30 wins. We were able to play Duke in the first round of the NCAA tournament. That same year, we went to the College World Series. In fact, we were one of only 4 Division I teams in the entire country that year, just 2 years ago, to go to the men's basketball tournament and the College World Series. The other ones were TCU, Virginia, and Tennessee.
Wow.
And so when
Good
you
company.
talk about that's a great stat, and every one of those teams has a budget over 150 million. I believe they're probably 200 million, and I'll just tell you, ours is not. Right. So just a fraction of that. Right. But I've always believed that you don't need the biggest budget to win. Right. And there are different things you can do culturally, things, leverage you can pull to compete. We've proven that. So it's been really great to be in this situation and see the resurgence of ORU. In fact, the men's golf team just 2 days ago won the Summit League Championship in men's golf. So we got a lot of different things going. The men's soccer program has become a top 15 team. Women's soccer's played 2 times the last 3 years in the championship game. So a lot of different things going on. And we compete, as far as your question, in the Summit League. So there are about 31, 32 conferences in NCAA Division I. Most of those conferences are what we would call mid-major. Some might be a little bit more low major on their budgets. ORU falls and the Summit League falls into more the mid-major, high mid-major category. But those power teams that you were talking about that used to call it Power 5, but then the Pac-12 kind of dissolved and went away. And so now you really only have Power 4, right? You have the Atlantic Coast Conference, you have the SEC, Southeastern Conference, you have the Big Ten Conference, and you have the Big 12 Conference. Those are kind of the 4 conferences that house the top budgets in all of Division I. And so we compete all together in what we say is the same umbrella, but you could definitely break it up into different categories or even stratospheres now of who is spending what and how much they're spending. And what we're going to talk about today, name, image, and likeness, which is really going to transition after the House settlement here, which is a settlement in a case out in the Ninth Circuit in California, is going to change all this, where there's even going to be revenue sharing, different types of ways to get athletes money, where the amateur model is almost cracking a little bit, and we're seeing almost a semi-pro model where kids are almost being paid to play. We don't like to say that, but that's basically what's happening now with just straight revenue sharing. And so all that has really happened, Jeff, just in the time that I'm not even the time that I've been at ORU, but just in the last 2-3 years. It's amazing to see how far the pendulum swings. In America, we do this kind of thing where we're over here and something's messed up. We swing over here and we don't even really do this middle thing. We kind of break everything up. And so that's kind of the landscape that we're in now, where we're not even sure what the rules are in NCAA from day to day.
Well, I'll tell you, and I'm sure Sarah can attest to this. We have no idea what you're talking about when you talk about the pendulum swinging or having no idea. We just deal with tax law every day. So we definitely get what you're spilling out there, Tim. And I really appreciate the backdrop that you're giving us here, because I think it's important when you start getting into some of these details, because there is a difference in these conferences and as it relates to NIL. And one last question I want to ask you to paint this backdrop is just to kind of give an idea of who ORU is again. Tell us two things. One is tell the story where Oral Roberts, why athletics was important to Oral Roberts, his famous saying about the newspaper. And then that's where it started. Bring it to the current day. And I always hear you tell us about ORU's vision for their student athletes. And would you kind of share that original story and bring us to the current day and tell us what that current vision is?
So a lot of this, I had to kind of research on myself and figure out, being a somewhat younger guy here. But obviously, Oral Roberts himself, with Billy Graham, probably back in that time, one of the biggest evangelists in the entire world, right? And so he was the first televangelist, right? He's the first one back when there was only NBC, CBS, ABC, and you had an antenna on your TV. Oral Roberts had one of the primetime TV shows that was either Friday or Saturday night. And so when we talked to a lot of our donors, they grew up watching this show. And even though he was a Christian and the show was about Christianity and evangelizing and trying to get the word out there of Jesus, man, he would have Johnny Cash on the show. He'd have Johnny Carson on the show. And it was a little bit of kind of a late night TV show as well. And so his popularity grew. And one of the things he really wanted to do, that he felt like God was telling him to do, was build a university, right? Where you could have the Holy Spirit, you could have education, everything tied together, and have a Christian focus in your education. And so he did that, right? He created that. And one of the things he did when he created that was he always believed, and we do too, that if you're going to be something and if you're going to be Christian at something, well, you need to be excellent at it, right? And you need to not do it in a half manner. We want to be great at what we do. And so he said, the majority of men out there, the sports page is their Bible. And so he wanted to have a really great athletic department that would lead people to see Oral Roberts winning, that would lead them to look up what Oral Roberts was, what Oral Roberts University stood for, and potentially evangelize them that way, or get them a little bit more of a taste into, okay, well, what does this mean? How do they stand? What do they do? How do they win? And what do they stand for, right? That type of thing. So that's the basis of how it got started and why there was an athletic department. Now, for some reason, he hated football. I'm not sure why. I wish I could have been back there in the day to change that. But for some reason, he hated football, right? So anyway, that leads us into, today. We really want to continue that ethos and that mission of what the university stands for, right? And that, as any athletic department, we're here to further the university or further the mission of the university. That's why we're here. We're not on our own island. That's what education and athletics needs to be about. Sometimes I think we lose that a little bit in everything that we're talking about. But we revamped our mission a little bit a couple of years ago, where we want every student athlete to leave the athletic department with a diploma in one hand, a championship ring on the other, and a heart for Jesus, ready to change the world. And that's what our mission is. That's what it's always been. That's what it always needs to be here at ORU. And so we're proud of that. I think we've really done a good job accomplishing that. Obviously, we're never perfect, and we want to continue to do the things that we need to do. But that's kind of been a little bit of where it came from. Skipped a little bit, huge there in the middle, right, and where we are right now. So
that's exactly what I wanted you to share. So
you got it, man. You got it.
So, and really, again, just to paint the backdrop of what's different about ORU versus some of these other programs that we're going to talk about. That's not to say these other programs don't love Jesus, don't care about their athletes or anything like that, but there's somewhat of a different focus when you're comparing these. So let's jump into NIL, Tim, and get a little bit more into the details and the weeds of this thing. So we've been saying,
I've just been,
go ahead,
I am
Sarah,
lost.
do you have a question?
I do not have a question, but I'm ready to learn about this because I have no basis, no anything with NIL. So I'm excited to learn about all of this, and I'm going to be kind of quiet and silent as I have been the whole time, because I think, like Jeff said, this is his passion, and he loves to learn about this stuff.
Well, and it's a fascinating topic because, as Tim said, it's changed just in the last 2 to 5 years drastically. So NIL stands for name, image, likeness. And at a very, very high level, in its most simplest form, this is the program under which student athletes in college are now being paid. So way back in the day, the NCAA had extremely strict guidelines on what student athletes what you could give them, how they could operate as a student athlete. I mean, we had a conversation once, Tim, where my pastor had a son that was on the ORU baseball team, and me having a pass to what we call the Grand Slam room, I wanted to give to him to go watch his son play. And you're like, no, you can't really do that. And that was just 4 years ago. So, Tim, NIL, most of our listeners may know this because they may hear words like the portal. They may hear the name of this. And what's the name of the guy from Tennessee, Nico, that just wanted the football player quarterback that wanted a $10 million deal with Tennessee. So we're not talking little dollars here. Tim, NIL, give us some background. What is it? How did it originate? And where's it going?
So to take you back here, I would say in all these rules, everybody makes fun of the NCAA because they got a rule book this thick, but every one of those rules came about for a certain reason, right? And the NCAA itself is just made up of the membership. So it's not like the NCAA is this bad entity. We voted on the rules. We came up with them. We voted on them, and it was all to level the playing field, right? Because we want the in the grand scheme of things, you want the ORUs to be able to compete with the Tennessees. Right. That's the basis of all of this. Now, as we go, I don't think Tennessee wants that anymore. But this whole thing came about when I'd say that the apex of this was, and I can't remember when this happened, but we had a skier at the University of Colorado who was, I think, really popular, was one of these Michael Phelps guys where he could have gone and won a bunch of gold medals, and he had a lot of opportunities to have sponsorships out there, right? Whether it was Ford or Chevy or whatever you might have. And the NCAA said you can't do that. If you do that, you're going to lose your eligibility, right? So that kept going, and that kind of, I think, festered for a little bit. And then you had a guy named Ed O'Bannon who decided to sue this is where the whole crux of the whole thing started, with this O'Bannon versus NCAA case. And what he was upset about was there were video games about NCAA Division I athletics, football, basketball, where he was saying, you guys are using my name, my image, my likeness, and you're making money, and I'm not getting anything, from it. And I would even say where it is now. I mean, I don't think he even imagined where it is now, right? So anyway, he sues, and then you see a little bit of things change. You see the NCAA through these lawsuits say, we're going to give what's called cost of attendance, right? So normally, when you came to school and you got your grant and aid, right? That was your room and board, your books, your tuition. If you were a full scholarship player, that's what you got, right? And that was it. You couldn't do anything that was called an extra benefit, which would be giving your pass to a dad or giving your pass to a recruit or letting a recruit come in. We had rules where you couldn't put anything extra on a bagel, right? It was ridiculous, right? Yeah. It got ridiculous. So the pendulum's all the way over here on the things you couldn't provide for student athletes. Now, some of these guys, Jeff, are coming from some of the worst environments and home lives you could ever imagine. So sometimes, I remember being at Arkansas and some guys would say, hey, all your players are only wearing Arkansas gear. What else can they wear? Something else. That's all they had to wear, right? So, if they're going to give a presentation, if they're in accounting, and sometimes we had to find ways to get them clothes just to do things that sometimes maybe us take for granted who don't come from that kind of background. So anyway, it's very strict, right? So they say we're going to give what's called the cost of attendance. That's a formula that is a federal formula. Every school's different. Then we got into this day and age where I remember being at Clemson when the cost of attendance came out, and we thought, oh my, Auburn has a higher cost of attendance than we do. They're all going to go to Auburn, right? That's what everybody's fear was, and it was only like $1,000 difference. So I'd give my left arm to go back to those days, right? So the cost of attendance came about, and then another lawsuit hit where it was, okay, well, we want, educational benefits where normal kids are getting laptops or they're getting certain things that would come along with an educational type of benefit that we don't get because we're athletes, and you say that's an extra benefit. So within probably the last 4 or 5 years, maybe 6 years, we had what's called this was the Alston case, right? This is just the name of who was suing the NCAA at the time. So we call this Alston dollars. And for some reason, Judge Wilkin they always file in the Ninth Circuit in California under Judge Claudia Wilkin, right? That's she's kind of looked at as the most liberal. And so they go out there and what's she going to do? And so she's probably been more of a head of the NCAA than anybody else. And I couldn't tell you the whole background, but she came up with the Alston money is going to be about $6,000, $5,900. That's how she came. I don't know how she came up with it. But so for the last 5 years, you've been able to give kids cost of attendance and Alston. Okay. So then you had this house settlement this house case come. That's the newest case, right? And there are since cases filed back after house, but we're dealing with house right now about dealing with name, image, and likeness and how we're going to get more, money in the students' hands. And so the way this developed, Jeff, was it was supposed to be, if Jeff's a really good basketball player or a really good football player or a really good baseball player or whatever have you, and I'm a dealership, I'm Tim Johnson dealership, and I want to put your face on my billboard, right? Or have you come out and do a signing or have you do an appearance at my dealership. Or if I'm a card company and I want you to come out and sign autographs, that's what this was supposed to be about. That's name, image, and likeness. It was not supposed to be pay for play. It was supposed to be fair market value. And Jeff, you might be a great basketball player, but I can guarantee you wherever you play, you're not worth $1 million, right? Well, what's happening here is once we let we said, okay, we're going to let people and student athletes get a little bit of money based off their name, image, and likeness. So what happened when the student or the NCAA allowed that, right? You're always going to have people trying to find loopholes, and that's exactly what happened. So you've heard of the term collective, I'm sure, right? Well, each one of all the 501c3 is a collective, right? I mean, we're collecting money and bringing it in and trying to raise money for a good cause. And so that's what happened. You had these different groups getting together and say, okay, we're going to be a collective and we're going to collect money and pay these student athletes name, image, and likeness deals, right? And so what happened is instead of doing it the way that we thought was going to happen, you had, I'll just take OU's collective or OSU's collective, some of these Power 4 schools would get together, get this kid in and say, okay, we're going to pay you $600,000 to come in and do XYZ, right? There was usually a contract. And if you have a contract, there's got to be consideration. The kid has to do something for the money, but nobody was policing anything. So I heard stories of Texas where kids would come in and get paid a significant amount of money and have to sign one ball and leave, and that's it.
And you're talking about actually doing something other than play their sport.
Right. So this is something other than play their sport because we weren't really at the pay for play concept. Right. So as part of this house thing, and we're trying to make it go away, we're trying to say, we're going to settle this and allow students to make money off their name, image, and likeness. It kind of starts snowballing a little bit. I'd say this is probably 3 years ago, right? Where we started hearing about this, or we go, whoa, that's not what it was supposed to be. It's supposed to be fair market value. If you're at Texas, if you're at Oklahoma, if you're at ORU, how do you figure that out, right? How do you figure out what the fair market value is? If it's just what somebody's willing to pay, then that you're kind of in a situation where you don't know what to do, right? So it continues to spiral out of control here, where eventually the NCAA, to try to settle this lawsuit that was a class action lawsuit of everybody who was ever in the NCAA past this certain amount, to try to pay them what they would have been worth, their name, image, and likeness. The NCAA said, okay, here's what we're going to do. Now, the frustrating thing for mid-majors is a lot of this was made in a vacuum where we weren't really asked our opinion. And we're going really quickly and we're doing things maybe without thinking them through, and we're making decisions and we're just being told about it. And you don't really know who's in the room and who's making the decision and who the lawyers are. And so a lot of confusion in the NCAA space and the collective space and the student athletes, everything. Just wide range confusion where you really feel like it is the Wild West. As Barry Switzer says, the famous coach of OU, he says NIL now stands for now it's legal, right? All the things he used to joke about that he used to do, right?
Yeah, because quite honestly, Tim, and some of our listeners may know this, some of them may not, but there was an athlete years and years ago who they took away his Heisman Trophy because he had some kind of extracurricular deal. And so they took that away for years because of that. And now it's just, like you said, it's completely gone the other way.
Well, Jeff, and that wasn't any more than 15, 20 years ago that happened to Reggie Bush, right? I don't know the exact date. So you're looking at that just 15-ish years ago. You're looking at the O'Bannon case, which led to cost of attendance. And so all of this within 15 to 10 years. The O'Bannon case, which led to cost of attendance, the Alston case, which led to educational benefit, and then this House class action, which has led to, well, we're going to give your tuition plus about $12,000. That's the total of cost of attendance in Alston, to the quarterback at Tennessee making $4 million. That's in a 3 to 4, 5 year period. You could get $12,000 extra dollars to $5+ million or whatever they want to pay you, right? So it's amazing to see the exponential growth in what's happening here in the NIL situation, to where now, as I said, this House case, what the new rules are going to be is you can bring all this stuff in-house, right? So the collectives, as I was talking about, necessarily couldn't be under the purview of the athletic department, had to be separate, had to be an arm's length deal. We couldn't necessarily set up deals. We couldn't necessarily, even though people were, right? We couldn't necessarily set up deals, talk about what they were, negotiate money. Because this is pro model. This is a professional model.
Absolutely.
That we're in now. And now that all comes in-house, so with the House settlement, really 3 reasons why that's important to understand. And as you guys understand and what you do, what I heard about is a lot of kids, as this is happening, okay, a lot of kids are, the NIL situation and agreements are taxable income.
Absolutely.
Okay. So the cost of attendance, the Alston, that's still part of your school benefits, scholarship. That's not taxable. So we go to this situation where this NIL stuff is taxable, and kids don't know how to pay their taxes. They don't know how to take care of money. They just go and as we see why 4 or 5 years out from most professional athletes are bankrupt or don't have any money. Well, that's not, you can imagine if you just go back 2, 3 years and you're giving this to 18, 19, 20-year-olds, well, it's even worse.
Yeah.
And these kids, and they're telling people they make more than they make, and they don't know where to go. And you have agents now taking advantage of them, and where, we have to tell and warn kids. And we're trying to create a class, even at ORU, to teach kids about this. So this is this jarbled mess of everything going on in the last 5 years, just trying to understand what the rules are and to protect kids, right? Because we don't want kids to be taken advantage of. And the pro model too is, an agent in the professional ranks, there are rules. So there are rules. There's collective bargaining. We understand what the rules are. You mentioned the portal. I haven't even mentioned that yet. When you throw in the portal, there was another
what's
lawsuit.
The portal?
Yeah. Sarah wants to know what the portal is.
So when you go back to trying to maintain a level playing field, right? One of the reasons in the professional ranks you have contracts is so that players can't just bounce around anytime they want, right? That would create anarchy. Well, welcome to NCAA Division I, because it used to be that if you were going to transfer from somewhere, you had to sit out a year, right? That was at least the ability that we had to try to keep kids where they were and try to create a little bit of stability. Well, somebody sued on that. Right. And at the end of the day, the NCAA is a horizontal agreement that is an antitrust violation. OK, every single rule we have is an antitrust violation. It's just, what do you want to sue on? Right. And so is the NFL, and so is the MLB, and so is the NBA. They're all antitrust violations. The difference is those leagues and organizations have an antitrust exemption from Congress. As we sit right now, the NCAA does not. So again, everybody likes to beat up on the NCAA, but they cannot make rules that are enforceable, because every single time we're sued, we're an antitrust violation every single time, right? So somebody sues on this and they win. And now student athletes are able to transfer and leave whenever they want without penalty.
Wow.
So what we've done here is in a matter of, this is probably within 3 years. So within 3 years, we have thrown in as much money as you want to make with no rules, to leave and go wherever you want with no rules. Now, what that has created is an explosion of I would say, bad actor behavior, situations where you don't know what's true. You don't know if the offers are true. Nobody's policing this. There aren't any fair standards. There aren't any rules where you can understand, okay, what's the value going to be? Are they telling the truth? To where nobody knows anything, right? I mean, like nobody knows anything. And it creates a situation where I'll just tell you. So in Major League Baseball, if you're an agent and you create and negotiate a deal for somebody, you can get probably 2-3% of that deal. I mean, and in the NCAA and what I'm dealing with now, I've heard of agents and guardians and bad actors who take up to 30-45% of the deal they're creating for these kids. And that's taking advantage of these kids, right? And then sometimes they don't tell them how to pay their taxes. They don't tell them to put away a certain amount of money. They don't tell them how to protect their wealth. And so when you give that amount of wealth to kids who, some of them have come from rough backgrounds, some of them have come from good backgrounds, but they don't understand the gamut of what to do, it creates a problem, right? And there's a problem with a lot of athletic departments too, who I'm blessed to have a law background, a little bit of a background where I could protect people financially. That's not the case everywhere, right? And so a lot of times athletic departments just want the best kid right now. And I worry about who's watching out for the kid, what the mission is of the athletic department. Coaches obviously have to win or they're going to be fired. And so sometimes I worry about them, not even their fault, but wanting what's best for the kid as well, to where we're in this situation where it's just a mess. It's just a big old mess. That's the only way to describe it.
Big old mess. And basically what you're saying is it's, back in the day, and back in the day may have been 10 years ago, the big issue was someone that came in, and especially in basketball, was a one and done. They'd come in 1 year, really elevate the program or supplement the program, then they take off to the NBA. And there was that recruiting process to get that athlete in the door. Nowadays, that portal is just like a draft more than anything else. You see these stories of, it seems like especially basketball coaches, basketball teams, because they're smaller, where a coach will lose 4 or 5 of his starting 5 because they just looking in from the outside, a sports fan, they just want to not necessarily elevate their game, but where can I get a better deal? Is that kind of what's really going on in the portal there?
Yeah, no doubt. And when you look at it, Jeff, this whole thing started because I think this narrative came out that I think everybody thought everybody in NCAA Division I was Texas, right? And you start hearing about these massive media deals and what ESPN's paying for games and what CBS is paying for games. And the problem is when you break it down, there are probably 360 to 370 Division I teams. Of those 370 Division I teams, I'd say the number now is 30 of them make money. So when you only talk about 30 of them making money and revenue sharing, it's kind of like, well, what are we talking about? Because so much of that money goes to support so many other programs. And one of the things that has really hurt a lot of us, why we got in this business, is at the end of the day, we're about opportunities, providing opportunities, right? And NCAA athletics provides more opportunities and scholarships than any other program out there besides the GI Bill. So when you go back and look at who was able to change their life, who was able to get a degree when they couldn't afford it, who was able to kind of generation break some of the worst situations that we've seen, we've let all that been thrown out with this NIL, thinking that everybody just makes a bunch of money and we're just hoarding it. And it's true. At the highest level, Nick Saban was making a bunch of money, right? Dabo Swinney makes a bunch of money. But we've changed the entire landscape for 1%. And I think that when you do that and you change all the rules for 1%, because it kind of goes like this, 3% of high school kids will play college athletics. 1% of those college athletes will play pro. And what we've done is created this situation where this isn't, we've been talking about men's basketball and football, but I'm telling you, it's in women's basketball, it's in golf, it's in baseball, it's in track. We have people who offer even our athletes in track when they're not supposed to be. That's tampering money to get in the portal, and we're going to give you 6 figures, and you're a track athlete, right? So this is a track athlete who's getting offered 6 figures at a school I won't name in the South. that they're not supposed to be contacting these kids, right? And so it's just, how are you going to enforce this? How are you going to make this something that's reasonable if you don't get an antitrust exemption? This lawsuit that I've been mentioning, this House settlement, it's going to provide three main things that create the main benefit. Okay. One is you can now do rev share payments, right? So you can, which is basically, I mean, they don't like saying it, but that's pay for play, right? So rev share payments is the athletic department makes a certain amount of money, and we're just going to share some of that revenue with you because you play basketball here, right? Next is you can bring NIL in-house. So instead of having a collective, I can take a basketball, football player, whatever, and have an NIL agreement in-house, and I can pay him money that way. And then third would be I can create more scholarships. So Title IX, in the NCAA, you kind of have what we call head count sports and equivalency sports. So a head count sport is if you give any scholarship at all, has to be full. So these are your men's basketball, women's basketball, football, volleyball, and women's tennis. Those are the sports that if you do give a scholarship, they have to get full rides. Everything else, your baseballs, your men's and women's golf, men's and women's soccer, track, cross country, swimming, those are situations what we call equivalency, because you can give a 25% scholarship. You can give a 10% scholarship. So what we saw there in the past was, I'll take baseball, for example, because we've been historically really good at baseball here at ORU, and it's something we're really worried about from a mid-major standpoint. So in the past, with Title IX, and no one can really even tell you how these numbers came about, except they were Title IX, right? So, I mean, baseball had 11.7 scholarships to divvy up. So how they got the 11.7 was somehow based on a Title IX equation. So 11.7 scholarships to divvy up amongst about 40 guys, right? So what this lawsuit is going to say is, for everybody in the country, we're now going to put a roster limit of 34 on baseball, but you could give out 34 full rides if you wanted, right? Same thing with soccer. So men's soccer is going to now have a 25-man cap, and you can give out 25 full rides instead of 9.9. Same for women's soccer. Women's soccer is going to have a 25-person cap, and instead of their 12 or 13, you can give out fulls. So what you're seeing is what we're scared of that's going to happen. You talked about the difference between the haves and the have-nots. Well, one of the reasons that everybody wanted those caps and scholarships to begin with is what? It created a little bit of a level playing field, right? So the situation was, I knew Arkansas or Tennessee or Alabama couldn't give more than 11.7 scholarships. Now, there were stacking in different ways that people tried to.
There's always a way around the rules.
There's always a way.
Yes.
Right. But we knew it, by and large, they're not going to get much further than that, right? Well, now, if you have a lot of money, if you have a lot of, big endowment, if you have certain ways to get scholarships to kids, I mean, you're going to have programs that historically haven't been good at baseball who are going to give 34 full rides. And what's the rest of Division I going to do? What are the other 350 schools, 330 schools going to do when we start getting lapped by some of these schools that are making such a large amount of money on some of these other revenue producing areas? Those are just some of the areas that we're worried about, that just hit us on a day every single day. We're worrying about something, about what's going to happen and how we're going to field our rosters, right?
And when does this case, when does the results of this case come out? Do you know?
We've been talking about it for a couple of years. Last April was supposed to be the final kind of, she gave preliminary approval to it early in the spring. Okay. Then in April, we were supposed to have a final meeting. Well, that final meeting led to her saying some of those rules she wanted to be phased in. Mm-hmm. So I heard you heard me talk about the roster caps. So right now, most football Division I teams are carrying probably 120 kids. Well, the roster cap would be 105. So you got about 20 kids that are going to lose out on opportunities here because we created this roster cap. And she didn't like that because, again, that's also costing opportunities. That's another horizontal agreement that could itself be considered an antitrust violation. So she wants to see that more phased in. So the NCAA is going back with the plaintiff's lawyers and kind of figuring out how to maybe say, okay, within 3 years, we're going to phase this in and let these kids play a little bit and grandfather some of them in. But I would say you're going to get approval of this sometime in the summer. And the question is that going to be enough time to institute these new rules for the new year? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, no one knows if I can make an agreement with the kid, if the kid has to go through the collective still. I mean, a lot of this stuff's still up in the air.
Well,
Tim, I have a couple of questions.
Go ahead.
I've got multiple, but I'm going to hone in on one. As a mom of a D1 or D3 lacrosse player, and soon to be another, I hear about all of this, and it really gives me. I have so many concerns because I think about the student athlete. I think about what are their responsibilities? What kind of pressure does this put on a professor? You've got these students who are coming in, they're making big bucks in D1. What about the pressure? Do they still have is the responsibility still there to perform in the classroom, to be a great ambassador of the university? Or, Tim, is it now a business? And as a business representative, as an AD, when you look at your investment, you're thinking of all this revenue. You're thinking of the expense that goes into it. But when you look at that generally, you're kind of looking at the long term. With the portal, there's no way to gauge it. So call me crazy. It seems a little wonky. It's not necessarily this old model that we had where our mission goals are to create and develop student athletes who are going to be contributing leaders in our world. But now we're looking at it from a business model. And when you invest in these student athletes, we don't know if they're going to be here for this season or for 4 seasons. So again, speaking out of ignorance, because I know D3, are these legitimate questions?
Look, without a doubt, I don't think in the history of the world, and I don't think this is an understatement, in the history of the world, I'm not sure we've ever had a system where so much now of the leverage has been on one side, right? Never. And it's creating what you're talking about. It's creating a situation where kids are feeling a little bit pressure. It's creating a situation where I had a call from one of our old student athletes a couple months ago, and he can't believe how much money he's not making in the real world, right? So it's like, we're not creating a situation for these leaders and developing the young generation who's going to be taking over of what hard work looks like, of what earning money looks like, of what it creates. What does a contract mean? What does loyalty mean? What does commitment mean? I think within 5-10 years, you're going to see, I hope not, but I think you're going to see problems when this generation gets out there and is leading in the community and is wondering, oh, well, I don't like it at CCK. I'm just going to go somewhere else. I mean, and I'm sure you're already seeing that a little bit as this generation gets in there, and it's just creating a situation where it's not about the education. Again, and I'll tell you this, Christy, for 350 of us, it still is about the education. And I hate that we haven't talked about that because I want kids. It's a human producing tool for me. That's why I'm in it, is to develop kids on the other side, to see them go on and do great things. And you lose a little bit of that when you hear at the highest level, okay, well, we're bringing a kid in, we're paying him $4 million. He's only going to do online classes. He's never going to be on campus. The kids aren't going to really know him. The fans aren't really going to know him. And by the way, as you mentioned, if North Carolina comes in and says, well, we'll give you $4 more, they might just leave.
Yeah.
Right. And you have to teach kids that there's so much more to it than what I think is being told to them and pitched to them by people who are not for their best interest. We've lost kids. I guarantee you this. We've lost kids because the agent or the guardian or the advisor wanted them to go somewhere where they would make an extra $5,000.
Yeah.
Right. And so we're sending a kid to a location, to a coaching staff, to a program that's not best for the kid because the agent's going to make $5,000 more dollars. And again, it just creates a situation where we used to think, okay, these kids are getting out, and 60% of kids getting out of college still owe something. Well, these kids don't, right? They got their education, they're debt free. Well, if they're not paying their taxes, if they're not,
yeah, I was going to say they might have
a bunch of debt. And then, Jeff, for you guys too, well, here's what's crazy too, is this whole thing is getting so out of hand. You've got states, I think Arkansas just did this. You have states that are now passing laws for at least a state income side of things, that if you come here and you make NIL money in the state of Arkansas, you won't owe any income tax in the state of Arkansas. Now, what is that going to teach kids?
Wow. That is
and why are they doing that? They want kids because Arkansas wants to win football, right? So they want kids to come here so they can say, hey, if you come here, you're not going to be able to, you won't have to pay taxes in the state.
Wow. Christy, did you have any other questions?
Oh, I could have a whole nother podcast on it,
We
Jeff,
could.
so it's
No.
probably good for me just to sit still.
Yeah. Tim, you've done an incredible job of touching on everything that I wanted to touch on. I wanted to know who pays this money. You talked about the collective. I wanted to talk about how is that money being collected. So in theory, it's a 501c3, correct? The collective is. So in theory, if I'm a big basketball fan and I want you to bring in a big talent, I can make a charitable contribution to this, which is even crazier.
But the federal government came in and said collectives are no longer tax deductible.
Okay.
So
Okay. I appreciate that clarification.
But if it comes in house, right?
Yeah.
ORU is a 501c3 and tax deductible gift. And so, how will that be treated by the federal government? We don't know yet.
Good point. Yeah. Good point. Where I kind of want to go to just wrap this up, because there's so many rabbit holes we could go down. But you brought up a good point, and it really was on my list to touch on, is what is ORU doing from the perspective of helping their student athletes in this arena? You talked about a class. Are you bringing in advisors? Do you have continual training? How do these student athletes know, instead of the millions of dollars, we're talking, in theory, tens of thousands, maybe, what they need to do with it, how they need to monitor it, how they need to manage it? How are you serving your student athletes?
No, that's a great question. And for us, we feel an obligation to, again, and there's going to be kids next year making a lot of money, right? And so I feel like there's an obligation for us to teach them, at least try, right, to do the right thing with their money and to at least know what the options are. And so one of the things we did at ORU is we created a Gen 150 class that has a lot of these topics in it. So all freshmen have to take it. And it talks about financial planning, and it talks about taxes, and it talks about what wealth advisors do and things you can do, what a CD is. I mean, because you'd be amazed on the amount of kids. You would think that, I'll put it this way, never before has a generation had so much information at their fingertips, yet do they know less. Right.
Good point.
So you've got to be able to teach them what the real world means, what it's going to do to them, how to take advantage of it, what to look for, how people are going to try to take advantage of them. And our coaches are for that too. But it's how do you go ahead and continue to teach those kids without taking another hour of their time, right? Where, we have so much on them that it is like a job. And so, and again, we haven't talked about how there's another lawsuit, whether or not they're employees, right? But the question is, how do you at least feel that you've given them the tools and introduced them to the people? And we're still in the middle of this, Jeff, and you and I have talked about it and how we can do it better. And how even, you guys can be included to where we can say, hey guys, here are options and people you can talk to who can answer questions. Please take advantage of it. You will owe money on this. So you need to be prepared and know what you need to do. And not everybody has great parents, right? Unfortunately. And so how do you make sure that you at least feel like you did your job to where you led these players, at least to the water? They got to drink, but we got to lead them there. So at least I feel that's our obligation as we continue to provide them opportunities, and that itself come with issues and potential problems, to show them what they can do to take advantage of the different options that they have.
Well, and that just goes in line with the vision and purpose of ORU, is investing in the entire person, whole person, as you all refer to it, and just taking care of your student athletes. It's not just a commodity that comes through the doors of your university. They're a real person. So, and you deal with all that in addition to everything else that you have to deal with as it relates to the athletic department. So it's pretty simple job, sounds like, Tim.
I went in for my annual physical last year, and I was telling him all this, and he just took his stethoscope up and put it around my neck and said, I think this would be easier for you. And I said, it might be. It might be.
Well, we are thankful that we have you at ORU for this time to guide the university through that. So, Tim, just thanks for your expertise and your insight and your knowledge and walking us through all that. This is a surprise, as we wrap up, we have a final segment that we want to do with you. Mays, what's it called?
rapid fire with the person on the mic.
Yeah. So, and who does this? I don't know. I'm not cool like that. Stephen Colbert, is that
Yes,
it?
yes.
Okay. So I got a series of questions I want to ask you, Tim, just so that our listeners can get to know you a little bit better as a person. So are you ready? Are you up for the challenge?
I've been born ready, Jeff.
Okay. Question number 1, Michael Jordan or LeBron James?
Michael Jordan, not even a question.
Good man. Mayo or Miracle Whip?
Miracle Whip.
Okay. This goes to the heart of the matter, Tim. Cosmic Rewind or Tron?
Dude, Cosmic Rewind. I rode Velocicoaster and then Tron, and I think it ruined me forever with Tron. For some reason, I think Tron is lame because I rode Velocicoaster first.
Okay. And obviously, we're talking about Walt Disney World rides here. So,
yeah,
okay.
Cosmic Rewind. Absolutely.
Absolutely. I got 2 questions left, and neither one of these are meant to get you in trouble. Okay. Sweet 16 or the College World Series, which was a better experience?
I don't know, man. I don't know. I can't answer that. That's like choosing between babies, man.
Okay. That's fair. Way to toe the line there.
Tim.
Way to
Good
toe the line. Okay. Last question. And again, this is not meant to get you in trouble. You have a hall pass for any national athletic director position. You get offered. We just have to say, Tim, you got to go.
Look at this guy. What's he trying to do to me?
No,
he
is setting you up.
He is setting you up.
Good answer.
Not even Clemson, right?
No. Hey, I loved Clemson. Absolutely loved it. Loved football. Loved the people there. And I'll just let you read into that.
Yeah. Well, Tim, we thank you so much for being part of our episode today. Thanks for the insight, for the wisdom, for the knowledge. It's a little bit different than our previous episodes. We didn't really get into some of the logistics of the tax world, but just it's an interesting, fascinating situation that's going on in college athletics right now. And your discussion just gave us so much insight into all that. So thanks for being with us. We appreciate it. Sarah, do you want to talk about the podcast email?
Yes. If you want to reach out to us, if you have any questions, ideas for things you want to hear, email us at podcast@cckcpa.com.
Yes, we'd love to hear from you. Questions, comments. I think in this situation, they say like, subscribe, and comment. Is that what the young people say?
Yes, Frable, that is exactly what they say.
So if you have friends or colleagues that would find our podcast interesting, please share it, pass it on to them. As we wrap up, we do want to thank our main sponsor, CCK Strategies. Thank you for the opportunity to do this. Christy, as always, thanks for serving as our on-air producer. Thanks to Robert Mays for his intro and outro music, to Clarence Fisher with Tulsa Internet Marketing Services, for his help and assistance, and to Natalie Renfro and Emily Johansson for pressing the record button. We appreciate you. So we hope you found this episode interesting. Join us next time as these 2 CPAs get together to have a chat, and you get to find out who's on the mic.
The information provided on this podcast is for general informational and educational purposes only and does not constitute accounting, tax, legal, or financial advice. While we strive to provide accurate and up-to-date information, laws and regulations change and individual circumstances vary. Always consult with a qualified CPA or professional advisor before making any financial or business decisions. The views expressed by the hosts and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of any organizations they are affiliated with. Listening to this podcast does not create a client-accountant relationship. By listening to this podcast, you acknowledge and agree to those terms. And that's a wrap for this episode of 2 CPAs and the Mic. If you found today's episode helpful, please subscribe, share, and leave us a review. Have questions or ideas for a topic? Reach out. We'd love to hear from you. Email us at podcast@cckcpa.com.